So, this is something of a momentous occasion. This is the End of Mistborn Era 2, marking really only the second time in the entire Cosmere that any whole larger than a single book has ended. The first time being Era 1. The Cosmere has not had a lot of endings so far. Brandon Sanderson in general has not had a lot of chances to prove his ability to end a series. So far that was Mistborn Era 1 and now Mistborn Era 2. And obviously Wheel of Time, but that's a very different situation. And I am very happy to report that I think this was very, very, very good. This is pretty handily my favorite Era 2 book, I think. I think. It's been a while since I read the second book, because I really liked the second book. But I think this one beats the second book. Yeah, I don't really have any criticisms of this book. I'm just going to go into sort of my thoughts on everything that happened, which are, again, almost entirely positive. I don't really have any real critiques. So, full spoilers from here on out. First of all, the two big predictions I had for, well, I think I had like several big predictions. Okay, so of the predictions I remember having for this book and voicing in previous videos, I was right about Wayne dying at the end and being the hero. I was right about this book not really involving the Malwish very heavily, and more just sort of leaving them as like a thing to think about in the future. I was very wrong about Marasi joining the Ghost Bloods. And I was right about Wax being Mistborn, even though I think he still doesn't know it as of the end of this book. Which is interesting. Anyway. Yeah, let's talk about stuff. So, I'm gonna start with sort of what was obviously the most impactful, or at least obviously meant to be the most impactful. Your mileage may vary, but for me it worked. Storyline of this book, which was Wayne. Wayne was undoubtedly the star of this book. Wayne has always been the best character in Era 2, easily the most developed and interesting character. In my opinion, matched only somewhat by Steris. Which, I know, neither of those are the actual, like, supposed leads of this series, and yet, here we are. But yeah, Wayne has always been a very compelling character. I've had criticisms of the ways Wayne has been written in the past, including at the start of this book. I still am not sure that Wayne's misogyny, specifically, ever made a ton of sense as a character trait for him, actually. And I don't think it really added much to him as a character. Especially because Wayne is not a character who needed a character flaw. He already has plenty of really compelling and interesting and meaningful character flaws, and that just always felt a bit superfluous. But, other than that, Wayne is definitely the best character of Era 2. So I am glad that he got to be the star of the final book, and that in the end it was he who saved the day. And also died in the biggest explosion the world has ever seen, according to the word of God. Yeah, I really appreciate it. I really liked that scene. It was such a sweet scene. And I really liked how it was very understated, actually. The moment when Wayne pushed Wax out of the boat to sacrifice himself, it was a very understated moment. It wasn't like, it didn't feel like this big, like, dramatic twist. It more just felt like, yeah, the obvious next thing that was going to happen all along, because it was. I don't think it was ever meant to be a twist. I think if it was meant to be a twist, it failed, but I don't think it was. I think we were sort of meant to feel this rising dread throughout this book that Wayne isn't making it out of this one alive. Because that was like super obviously telegraphed from the start of the book, with literally from the prologue, with the story his mother told him. And I think that worked. And I think that as a result, I think that was a good decision, because as a result, when the moment happened, the overwhelming emotion wasn't shock or horror or even grief at Wayne's death, but just this appreciation for him as a character, this appreciation for what he's doing, and this awe of what he's willing and able to do in this moment, which I think worked great. I also like that he asked Harmony to wear his hat. That was cute. And I also like that when he was wearing Harmony's quote-unquote hat, he had this brief moment right at the end before he died where he felt a connection with his Terrace heritage. That was interesting, because that's not something that's been explored with Wayne at all. It's been explored with Wax, because both Wax and Wayne are part Terrace. That's how they get their ferrochemical powers. But they're not... But with Wax, it's important for his backstory that he's part Terrace, but with Wayne, it's never really acknowledged. He's been referred to as Terrace-born, as like his legal last name, a couple of times. So it's not like it's been hidden from the reader, but it just hasn't been important to him or to events in the plot. So it's interesting that one of the last things he does before he dies is that he has this moment of thinking like, oh, I don't remember the exact wording, but something like he felt almost like he was Terrace. And then he has this moment of thinking like maybe he had been all along, or something like that. I'm curious where that's going. I'm curious what's going to happen with that, because in a weird way, even though none of the characters are culturally Terrace in Era 2, Terrace blood has come up more than in Era 1. In that two of our main characters are part Terrace. So I am wondering whether in the future we will see sort of a resurgence of the narrative importance of the Terrace. I'm never a big fan of fantasy that obsesses over bloodlines, but here it feels less about bloodline and maybe more about culture, because what we saw in the previous book, in the prologue of this third book of Terrace culture, very much felt like it was meant to sort of hint at a better world, hint at potential solutions to a lot of the problems that the sort of general hegemonic basin culture has. I don't know, maybe, I don't know if Sanderson is willing to or interested in exploring themes like that, but to me it feels like we might be building towards maybe the Terrace becoming a lot more important in future eras of Mistborn. Anyway, that's enough of Wayne. I adore Wayne. I adore everything. I adore all the things he did with his money. I adore that he gave most of it to the daughter of the man he killed. That one was obvious. I like that he gave a huge gift to Renette and her wife, which, by the way, we have an actual canonical gay marriage in a Brandon Sanderson book. That's nice. I didn't expect that. I will note that Renette is a weird character in that she just kind of never became super relevant. She was just always a very vague background character. And I do wonder if that has to do with her being gay. I like a part of me, a cynical part of me is like, would Renette have been a more prominent character in this series if she'd been straight? I'm not necessarily saying that. I'm just noticing that it's like it felt in the first book like Renette would be a more prominent recurring figure throughout the series, and then she just wasn't. Anyway, um, I've gotten distracted. So that's it for Wayne. Let's talk about Wax. Wax, is interesting to me, and the reason Wax is interesting to me is because this book leaves on an odd note for Wax, because it kind of feels like he's still going to be the main character. I don't know when Era 3 is set. I don't know what the time skip is going to be between Era 2 and Era 3, and if Wax and Marasi are still going to be around. But there was this weird vibe at the end that felt less like the end of a series and more like, oh, next time on Waxilium Ladrian's Adventures. Like, Like, it felt like he's very much going to continue this career. Which I guess is fine if he does so off screen, but it would be interesting if... I wonder if he's going to be sort of like maybe a supporting character in Era 3. Under Governor Marasi, which obviously she's going to be the governor. Like, you don't set something like that up if she isn't actually going to succeed, surely. I think that's pretty much a given, that Marasi is going to be the governor. But yeah, that was an interesting ending for Wax. But the actual climactic, important scene with Wax was not the ending. The actual important scene was the ascent of the Shaw, the ascent of the tower in Bilming, which, by the way, the book just says that people call it the Shaw after Credit Shaw, but, like, which people? Like, is that its name given to it out of affection by the people who built it? In which case, that's a weird positive comparison to make. What? Like, you wouldn't name something in a positive context after the citadel of the evil emperor who kept the world enslaved for 1,000 years, surely. Or is that like a sort of mocking, a derisive title given to it by the citizens of Bilming who don't like it? It's unclear, but I just noticed that name and I was like, that's a weird thing for anyone to call anything in this world. But, like I said, it would make sense if it was like people who didn't like it naming it that. Anyway. Yeah, the ascent of the Shaw is a very interesting scene, because I think it is very explicitly meant to mirror Vin's assault on Set's keep in the Well of Ascension. There are very, very clear parallels in the way it is written. First of all, both are scenes of an extremely powerful Allomancer rising up a tower and just slaughtering hundreds of people along the way mercilessly. And I think that it's meant to be a purposeful comparison to sort of highlight the differences between Vin and Wax. When Vin did that, it was portrayed as a very bad thing. I've actually commented on this before. In the first book of Era 2, I commented on the fact that Wax just regularly kills so many people in ways that reminded me right away of the assault on Set's tower. and I sort of commented, I believe, in one of my reviews of The Alloy of Law, that felt weird to me. That it felt like it's weird that Vin was like condemned by the narrative for this, but Wax barely blinks when he does it. Now with this scene, I get the feeling that was always intentional. Because what we see here is the actual point, like the actual difference between Vin and Wax. When Vin did that, she didn't set out to do it. She did it out of this emotional anger. She did it out of a burst of uncontrollable rage, essentially, and frustration because of what was happening. And she took it out, and she did it sort of purposelessly almost. Whereas Wax here he is Harmony's sword. He is doing this with precision, and he is doing it with intent. He is killing basically just as many people as Vin did in just as horrible ways, but he is doing it after making the conscious decision to do so, knowing the full implications of what he is doing, and doing it with a clear and precise goal. And that goal then justifies what he has to do. Now, your mileage may vary whether you think that is a justification, but I think that's what the book is going for, and I think it's a compelling argument. I certainly do not think that I would be able to do what Wax does, and by that I don't mean just that I wouldn't be able, literally, physically, to do it. I mean that I don't think I would be able to make those choices, kill those people, kill so many people, for the greater good. But I think that Wax's character arc sort of naturally did lead to that point, where he like acknowledges his role as essentially a sword. He is the one who has to cut through evil so that others may live in peace. And there's another comparison made here, interestingly enough, much more explicitly, to a scene from Well of Ascension, which is that at one point as he's climbing up, Wax sort of sends a mental message to Sazed, and he's like, you made me do this, look what you've turned me into. You've turned me into this monster who just slaughters people who get in my way. You don't know what this feels like. And then Sazed sends Wax a brief vision of Sazed back at the end of Well of Ascension, when he used his full feruchemical powers to defend one of the gates of Luthadel, which was kind of a similar scene. Admittedly, in that scene, because he was fighting the Koloss, and the Koloss were kind of dehumanized in Era 1 in ways I was never very comfortable with, back in Well of Ascension, that scene wasn't really framed as like the issue there, like the thing that sort of broke Sazed there wasn't, oh, he just slaughtered a bunch of people and like the horror of what he's done. It was more just the physical exhaustion of having to do so. But it is interesting to see it sort of reframed in retrospect as also being about sort of the guilt and the weight of all those people he had to kill. Especially since, as far as I know, that was one of the, like, really the first time Sazed ever engaged in such mass violence. Because he was largely peaceful until that point. So yeah, that was an interesting moment. Also, Wax is spiked now. Wax has a hemalurgic spike inside his body. That's a new development. I don't know what to do about that. That is another thing that makes me think that Wax's story isn't over. You don't do something like that and then sort of leave the implications of it to linger in the air. At least I don't think Sanderson would. So I feel fairly confident that we will see way more of Wax in the future. Uh, because both because of that and because he's a full Mistborn now. Maybe, kind of. Like, there's a lot going on with Wax that didn't end up, like, fully being delivered on in this book. And that makes me pretty confident that Wax is going to keep being relevant, even if he isn't the main character, in Era 3. I think Sanderson said that the main character of Era 3 is going to be like basically a computer programmer or something like that. And I think he's also mentioned that the main character is going to be Terrace, which does work with my previous theory that the Terrace are going to become way more relevant. But yeah, that's it for Wax. I'm going to briefly just mention Steris and say that Steris was fantastic during this section. I loved her. I have in my notes here. Steris is a social battering ram. Which is because that's basically the role she plays in the Senate in Wax's absence. She has learned to essentially weaponize. As weird as this sounds, she's learned to weaponize her autism, I guess, in order to get results. She's able to say and do things that other people are unable to say or do because of social convention. And as a result, she is able to push through results in the Senate in ways that others are not able to. So that was already really interesting. And then her intricate planning pays off as well and saves the city. So there's a lot going on with Steris in this book that seems to sort of be framing her autism as a boon rather than a curse, which on the one hand is good, on the other hand, I feel like it's a bit of a trope, like framing someone's something that someone considers a disability, but then framing it as essentially being like kind of a superpower. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I like it, but I can also see that some people might not. But yeah, that's it for Steris. And now I get to talk about the most fun part of this book. And that is the Avengers Team Up. So, Marasi goes on a mission with a couple of Ghostbloods. And those Ghostbloods are Moonlight and a new character named Twin Soul. Twin Soul is probably from Taldane, because his powers seem to have similar rules to Sand Mastery, except they're not quite Sand Mastery. It's a different power, clearly, but it works similar to Sand Mastery in that he needs water for it. And also, he drops this huge bombshell for the entire Cosmere that apparently there are these things called ethers, which are essentially gods who are not shards of Adonalsium, and who are able to grant their own different forms of investiture to people, separate from the investiture granted by the shards. So that's really interesting. I don't know what to make of that, but it's interesting. And then we have Moonlight. And Moonlight is... Well, first, Moonlight is revealed to be a soul forger. I believe that's the term. Like the main character of the Emperor's Soul. And then Moonlight is heavily implied to be the main character of the Emperor's Soul. It's not confirmed, but I think Moonlight is shy. I think. Because she has this line about how she spent her whole life always looking out for herself and only looking out for herself, and she's only recently learned to sort of look out for others and be dedicated to a greater cause or whatever. So I'm pretty sure the implication there is that Moonlight is shy, presumably post-Emperor's Soul. And then she uses her super secret stamp on herself and becomes an Elantrian. I was proud of myself for figuring that was going to happen like a page before it did. Like right before she stamped herself, she explained what the stamp would do, and she said, "Oh, this stamp will essentially change it so that instead of being born in the part of my planet that I was born on, I will be born in a different country." And because that's how stamps work, they change your personal history. And because of how Cell works, where you're born determines what kind of investiture you have access to. And so obviously, as soon as she said that, I was like, oh, she's about to become an Elantrian. And then she did. Or did she? It's not entirely clear. She became something certainly as powerful as an Elantrian. There wasn't mention of silver, though. Like, she was mentioned as glowing and being, like, shining and radiant, but I don't think, unless I missed it, but I'm pretty sure that she was not described as having silver skin. So I'm not sure if she became an Elantrian, or if this is a different part of Cell that just has similar powers to Elantrians. She also called herself blessed or chosen of the Shayode. Shayode in this case spelled Shay-ODE, which blessed of Shayode, yeah, that's what she said. Which could be just the word Shayode as in Shaod, the thing that makes you an Elantrian. It could be that, and Marasi just sort of interpreted how it would be spelled differently based on how it's pronounced. Or it could mean that it's like a different group, but I think it's that. So I'm going to assume she's an Elantrian, and Brandon isn't introducing a brand new magic system from Cell in this book, which is not set on Cell, because that would be weird. Although he did do that with Taldane in this book, so maybe? But I don't think so. I think she became an Elantrian. Anyway, the implications of that are insane, because the implications of that are that forging essentially is another way to accomplish what hemalurgy accomplishes. We now have a second means of giving someone powers or investiture that they don't normally have. And that's really interesting to me. Especially it happening in this book, because this book is very, very much setting up the idea that people gaining powers through hemalurgy is going to be a major threat for the Cosmere as a whole, as the people of Scadrial expand beyond Scadrial. I did mention that I had some concerns about the Cosmere sort of becoming too much of an MCU situation where everything is interconnected. To clarify, I think that will be very good and fun. My concern is that it might lead to unfortunate side effects and make books less good. So I do not have a problem with the fact that this book is basically the Cosmere version of the Avengers. In fact, I think it's really, really cool, and it's one of my favorite elements of this book. However, I am worried what that will do to the series like 5 or 6 books down the line, if it keeps happening. We'll see. Yeah, that's everything I really have to say about the plot of this book. However, there is another thing I want to talk about, and that is the fact that Sazed is evil? Maybe? Or more accurately, so the first thing that happens is that I believe Telsin, I think it was Telsin, says to Wax at one point that Sazed is weakening and that discord is coming. Discord is near, is the word she uses. And discord is capitalized. Like the D is capitalized, even though it's not the beginning of a sentence. Which, you know, within the context of the Cosmere, when you see something like that, you think, oh, the name of a shard. And discord is the opposite of harmony. And then, when Wayne dies and sees Sazed in his god form, he sees this weird shadow. Sazed has this shadow sort of standing behind him that's darker than him. So I think that Ruin and Preservation are sort of reaching the end of their tether as far as how long they can coexist in harmony, and that that the nature of Sazed's shard is going to change. He is going to stop being harmony, and he is going to become discord. I, at this point, am fairly convinced, actually, that Sazed is going to be the antagonist of maybe Era 3 or Era 4, but certainly an antagonist in the future of Mistborn, which is very interesting. And not something I saw coming. Of course, there is a potential counter-argument to that, and the counter-argument is that Kelsier seems to think so. And Kelsier sucks and is wrong about everything all the time. So the very fact that Kelsier seems to think that is like evidence that it might not happen, in my eyes. But I still think it'll happen. I do think Kelsier is right here. But Kelsier is wrong about most other things, however. Kelsier is wrong about... I think Kelsier is very wrong about accelerating technological advancement. Well, I don't think he's wrong about the fact that it wouldn't... I think it's fine to do it. I don't actually oppose his plan. But I think he's wrong about the idea that technological advancement is what's going to protect Scadrial from other worlds. I think it's going to just draw their attention more. So I'm not super confident that's a good idea. He's also very wrong about keeping all the secrets that he keeps. I think that he should definitely share more with, with the people of Scadrial, really. I feel like a lot of the scientific discoveries and sort of investiture-based discoveries and stuff that the Ghostbloods have created should probably be shared with the general public. And Marasi also makes a good point, which is that, you know, all of this could probably have been prevented a lot earlier and with fewer deaths and people suffering if Kelsier had just come to them with information. So, yeah, I was wrong in an assumption I had at the start of this book. My assumption was that the Ghostbloods were going to be portrayed as basically entirely benevolent and positive in this book, to contrast how they are portrayed in Stormlight, to essentially to essentially demonstrate that the Ghostbloods are the good guys of Scadrial, but the bad guys of the Cosmere. Kind of. Not the bad guys, but like they're bad guys on the scale of the Cosmere, but they're good guys for Scadrial. And that still kind of happened, but I was wrong. I thought that they would be portrayed as entirely good and that Marasi would join them. But no, Marasi saw through their bullshit. She hasn't confronted them about their operations off-world, presumably because she doesn't know much about them, which are obviously the main sort of black mark against the Ghostbloods. The stuff they've been up to in Stormlight is incredibly messed up. But she has rejected them. She has rejected their methods, which is interesting. I was fully expecting her to join them right up until the last second, actually. What else happened here? There's another thing I wanted to talk about in terms of implications for the future. But I can't remember what it was, which is unfortunate. Yeah, I think that's everything I have to say for. Oh, right. I do want to talk about one more thing, which is Telsin. Telsin is a missed opportunity in my opinion. I feel like Telsin as a character has been wasted throughout Era 2. In the second book, her betrayal happened before she was firmly established as a character, so the betrayal didn't really feel like much of anything. And in this book, she dies off screen, and Wax never mentions her again. It's just like the fact that she's his sister doesn't seem to matter anymore at all. And she keeps referencing like this complex relationship she and Wax had, but we never got to see that relationship. Overall, I just feel like Telsin was a missed opportunity because she just didn't have enough screen time. Autonomy, on the other hand, Autonomy also didn't have any screen time in this book, but she is a very compelling and interesting villain in my opinion. And I really like I like that there's like this contradictory weirdness going on with her ideology, where she's all about individualism, but like individualism through conformism in a weird way. I hope we'll get to see. I mean, clearly we will get to see way more of Autonomy in future books. So I'm hoping that her ideology will sort of be more developed in the future. Who else? Let me just look at my notes quickly here, so I'm sure I'm not missing anything major. Yeah, no, I think. Oh, right! The other thing I wanted to talk about is when Wayne did his incredibly enhanced Bendalloy bubble to do his self-sacrifice at the end. When Wayne did that, so he essentially what he did was like massively slow time around himself, and or rather massively accelerate time around himself. Sorry, within the bubble. There's a line that says something funny happened to his eyesight. Everything going all strange. Until he took another vial of Harmony's metals and burned steel to see that way instead. So his vision got messed up. And the previous book talked about redshift when burning Bendalloy. Now, in that book, Chris talked about specifically the absence of redshift, which she was sort of like confused by. But I think what we're seeing here is that light does get massively distorted by Bendalloy, but only if Bendalloy is used in a sort of duralumin enhanced form. And this pretty much confirms, I think, what I'm suspecting, which is that Bendalloy and whatever Marasi's metal is called, I can't remember it, but I think those two metals in unison, probably with duralumin, are going to be crucial for discovering faster than light travel and taking Scadrians into the Cosmere in future eras. And that was also referenced in this book earlier as well, when Tensoon said that he and Harmony have been sort of thinking that there's a secret way to use metals to travel very long distances very quickly, but they haven't figured it out yet. I think that's what's being implied here. I think we're going to see bend alloy and whatever the other metal is called being used in conjunction with duralumin to launch spaceships into the Cosmere. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. That is everything I have to say about this book. It's not. There's more, but that is everything I feel like I need to say, rather, in this video. So yeah, in conclusion, very good book. Not as fantastic, like strong of an ending to a series as Mistborn Era 1 was, but I think that's intentional because this is a lot less final of an ending. Mistborn Era 1 was very much written so that you could, if you just wanted to read the original Mistborn trilogy and never pick up another Sanderson book again, you could and you would be satisfied. There were very few loose ends at the end of Mistborn Era 1. It was an actual, like, proper ending with a capital E. That left room for the future, but very much also wrapped up the past. This is not that kind of ending. And I feel like that's on purpose, because I don't suspect that Era 3 is going to be nearly as far in the future from Era 2 as Era 2 was from Era 1. In fact, I suspect it'll only be a couple of decades, if that. I fully expect the next time I visit Scadrial in a book, I fully expect Marasi to be not only alive, but also the governor. And Wax to be maybe the first Mistborn in 300 years. So that is something to look forward to. But for now, it is time to settle into the long wait. The long wait until Stormlight Book 5. Although we will have all the secret projects in the meantime. I will be reading those, by the way. I'll see how many videos I'll make, because some of those might not be as meaty, I guess, as like the main Cosmere books. We'll see. I don't know what to expect of those. But yeah, that's all I really have to say. I will see you next week, hopefully, when I will start a new book series. And then the week after that, when I will start yet another new book series, because I will now be doing 2 book series in parallel for a while. That is going to be the future of this channel for some time. So, I am looking forward to seeing, hopefully, some people joining me for that. I realize that very few things are going to get as much of an audience as the Cosmere. But if not, I hope that those of you who don't join me for that will be joining me once I revisit the Cosmere in the future, once more books come out. So, see you all next week. Bye.